Welcome to the Me and Money podcast, where your hosts and certified financial planners, Matt Fizell and Elliott Appel, share their thoughts on hot topics, important concepts, and real-life stories in personal finance. Hear from Matt and Elliott as they share lessons learned in their own financial journeys and those they've witnessed throughout their careers while helping clients. Have a question you'd like to hear discussed on a future episode of the podcast? You can reach out to Matt or Elliott or drop your question at the link listed in the show notes. Before we get to the episode, we'd like to remind you that while both Matt and Elliott are financial planners, they are not your financial planner, and this podcast is only intended for educational purposes. For full disclosures, please be sure to listen to the end of the episode or check out the show notes on your favorite podcast platform. Now, on to the show with your hosts, Matt Fizell and Elliott Appel.
Welcome back to another episode of the Me and Money podcast. We're going to switch things up a little bit. I don't know how we came up with this idea, but I think it'll be a fun one. So, Elliott, why don't you share with the listeners what we're going to jump into over the next couple episodes?
I'm looking forward to this one. And I think I threw out an idea and you made it even better with this, but it's essentially red light, yellow light, green light, or green light, whichever order you want to go into. We're going to go through green light first today. And when I say green light, what are sort of always in personal finance should you be doing? And we'll caveat this with I think we run a disclaimer at the end, but it's not always for every single person. But we want to think of what should most people be doing? Because I think a lot of times when we ask financial planners, we give the answer, it depends. And I feel like these are topics where almost all of us can agree on in almost every circumstance or situation, most of the time.
Yep. I would say these are those things where, when we're having prospective client calls and they don't have these things, it's like, oh, we're definitely going to talk about those things. So, yes, talk about them. Are they 100% applicable to all of you listening? Probably, but again, consult your financial professional.
Yeah, we don't know you, but we can pretty confidently say these probably should apply.
Yeah. All right, Elliott, well, why don't you kick us off with our first green light item?
First one for me is a credit freeze. And I've racked my brain for a while now thinking who would this not apply to? And I have not come up with anybody. So if you're listening and you're like, hey, I know someone who should not have their credit frozen, I would love to hear about it and why, because I'd love to be proven wrong. And the reason I say this is Matt, I don't know how you feel about this, but I feel like our information's out there. Social security number, date of birth, all an actual credit bureau was hacked. I think it was back in 2017, which it was half of America at the time had their information out there. So for me, this is an easy lock down your credit. So if you go apply for credit, it's essentially not going to pull. But more importantly, if a scammer or fraudster, someone else tries to apply for credit in your name, it should shut down the process right there and then.
Yep. I would agree, unless you're buying a car today or tomorrow, maybe not worth your time, right? I think this one's pretty easy. I would also say, just as a slight side topic to that, this is a really good option. I mean, I don't know how you feel, Elliott, about some of those identity protection services, but I think if you just do this, which is completely free, and be careful on those websites, the Experian, Equifax, TransUnion, they're going to try to get you to buy something. You should not be paying anything to freeze your credit. But I think this is a really good step to avoid needing some of those identity monitoring tools. Sure, someone could still do something fraudulent, but chances are they're just going to try and get this free money from you, right? In the form of opening lines of credit. So I think this is just again, a no-brainer, simple, free, easy to freeze, easy to unfreeze, relatively painless thing that most people should be doing. And again, I would love to hear from people if there's a legitimate reason as to why you don't think you should freeze your credit.
Yeah. I mean, in today's day and age, once you create the account, which, I've done this with people before, and even older folks that maybe it takes a little longer to do it. Maybe it takes 45 minutes to create an account at each one, 15, 15, 15, the three that Matt had mentioned, TransUnion, Equifax, and Experian. But once you do that, it's fairly easy once you have your username and password to log in, unfreeze it if you need to, if you are applying for a car loan, and then apply it back on. Just do a temporary lift so it's only lifted for a day or two. So,
Yep. And if you're listening to this and you have aging parents or grandparents, for the love of God, like, please just go schedule some time with them and help them get this done. It will probably make your life a lot easier down the road.
and or if you have kids, do it for your kids too, or help your kids do it.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. I love that. I'm going to go next.
Yeah. What do you have?
Unless you have anything else on the credit freeze.
No.
All right. So item number 2, the emergency fund. I think this is, again, it's one of those things where it's kind of boring. It's not going to be the most, shall we say, efficient or maximizing thing, but a lot of people, I think, I'm really happy that when I go onto personal finance Reddit, I see people who are saving early and they're investing early, and that's all fine and dandy. But if you don't have that safety valve behind it when you either get laid off or can't work or something big happens at home, like a medical bill, or you got to put the roof on after a hailstorm or something like that, it's really going to disrupt those habits. And I think just having that emergency fund and being able to inject, that cash flow into your budget when you do have those disruptions to your normal pace of life, it's worth its weight in gold, right? And at the end of the day, getting started is the hardest thing. So again, I commend all the people out there who have started investing, but if you don't have an emergency fund, I think that's a pretty no-brainer item for them to get started with. How about you?
I definitely agree. I would say, and we don't have to go into too much detail, but like, how much an emergency fund and where do you keep it? I think those are the next 2 common questions for folks.
Yeah. And I think this is a really interesting thing because it is kind of like risk tolerance in a sense, right? Like, how stable is your job? How much would you be able to or want to adjust your lifestyle if something big did happen, right? Those are all very subjective questions. I mean, just personally, like, Allison's a nurse. I think that's a pretty as stable as they get job. There's almost always a shortage. So we do lean a little bit closer to that 3-month mark. But, some people who are in very volatile jobs, I think tech is probably a pretty good example, especially over the last few years. Like, maybe you want to lean a little bit closer to 6. But that all depends too on, do you have a spouse? Do you have support from other areas of life? Like, those are all really subjective things too. What would you add to that?
I was just, as you were talking, I was thinking, like, do you and your spouse work for the same company even, right? There's some people out there, like, there's sort of double risk in that. And I would also say, like, the reason for an emergency fund is also to prepare for a changing world. So as you talked about nurse, I thought back to, like, federal employees probably thought that their job would, like, historically, their jobs have been extremely safe, right? It's not too often that you go through mass layoffs or that sort of thing, but that changed the last few years. So I think that talks also to the importance of an emergency fund of, like, traditionally what is safe may not actually be safe in a future world. And I'm not going to go into, like, why it would be or not, right? Like, who knows? That's the whole point of it, is the uncertainty and why the emergency fund fills that gap. So I think that just goes to, like, it's a risk tolerance question when it comes to how much as well.
Right. Yep. I 100% agree with that. And I think too, just, going beyond that, like, there could be a seasonal reason why you want to go above 6 months. Maybe, you're planning on starting a family and you want to build your own paternity leave, or someone wants to go down in hours, or someone wants to be a stay-at-home parent, or you want to, take some time off after a job. I don't know. Like, there's so many other reasons. But I think it's just a good thing to remember. Like, take that number with a grain of salt, but you should have one at least 3 months, I would say, is a pretty safe piece of general advice.
For sure. And I'm going to speak to the retirees just for like 30 seconds here, because I think things change, at least for me personally, when you hit retirement, is you usually have a pool of investments. And for most people, you have a mix of stocks and bonds that you can pull from depending on how markets are doing. So I'm less concerned about a really long dated emergency fund, like 6 months or 12 months, because you can always pull cash from these portfolios. Now, there's tax planning and other pieces that go around that, but I just want to mention that because I think that's a time frame that a lot of people sometimes end up with a little more cash than they need or feel like they need it. And if you feel like you need it, nothing wrong with that. I'm not shaming that in any way. But just from a technical point of view, like if you have some bonds in the portfolio, you can also pull from those if stocks aren't doing well.
Yeah. I will say though, like there is still something very psychological about having some degree of cash, like whether it's just you want to take that trip or you want to help the grandkids do whatever. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like there's something magic about that first chunk of cash that you have. And I think that will make people who are saving in investments only, I think you'll feel a lot more comfortable once you have that cash buffer.
Yeah, definitely. I just want to mention that because I think
that's fair.
You hit on the cycle. Like I think when you're a retiree, it's more the psychological, emotional thing as opposed to like, oh shoot, I need this for when life actually happens. Right. Like there's actually disruption to my life at that point, as opposed to just the emotional side of things, which both are totally valid.
Yep. Agreed. All right. What's your next one?
Well, I want to spend just a little more time on this because
okay.
I think I had asked like, where do you keep it?
Because
I feel like this gets overcomplicated for a lot of people. And again, this is not advice, but like, what are some options?
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of people, right? Almost everyone has a checking account, right? So you can keep it there. You can keep it in a savings account at the same bank. I think there's a strong argument to be made for a couple of reasons. Having it at a separate bank, I think out of sight, out of mind can be really helpful when you truly are treating this as a emergency fund and not something that, it's Black Friday and that big TV that I wanted is on sale and I have, $30,000 sitting in the bank. Like I can go buy that. That's not the point of the emergency fund. So I'm a big believer. I know it creates another login and that can be annoying. I guess like a half option would be if you have a brokerage account, just putting it in there and putting it in a money market fund and at least earning a bit higher of interest. But if you are going to keep it at a separate bank, looking for a high yield savings account like at Ally Bank, Capital One, I think Goldman Sachs rate is pretty good. There's quite a few out there. Those are just the ones that I typically see. I don't know. Would you add anything to that?
And theoretically, you could do T-bills or CDs or, like an ETF that's a short-term government, like just options out there. But at the end of the day, I really like the savings account. I'm a big fan of simplicity. So I think like just an online savings account where you do most of your banking, hopefully anyway, that's where mine usually resides. Is the simplest and easiest option for most folks.
Yeah. Definitely not under your mattress or in a coffee can in the attic.
Or 100% stock ETF portfolio. I know sometimes that gets suggested online.
But then you could go kind of to your argument, if you have enough in there, but whatever. We won't go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else on the emergency fund?
Nothing on that one. I think we did a great job.
All right. What's next?
Tax avoidance. And I know that sounds like a weird one, but basically like the way that I'd frame it is people don't want to necessarily tip the government, right? We want to pay everything we're legally obligated to pay, right? We don't want tax fraud or tax evasion, but do we really want to pay more? And I know that sounds weird, but I think a lot of us end up paying more, particularly longer term over our life. If we're not doing tax planning, like we might just look in the current year and say, how do I reduce taxes as much as possible this year? But that might mean higher taxes in the future for a variety of reasons. And we've gone through different planning episodes of why that's the case. So I'm not going to go into detail here, but just how do I reduce and not pay more in taxes than I'm legally obligated, which oftentimes means being proactive, not just burying our head in the sand and saying like, oh, I'm just going to do this and I'm going to forget about it. I'm going to set it up once and be good.
Yeah.
What do you think?
100% agree. I also think you kind of alluded to it, but I'm just going to be a bit more blunt with it. Like, it also doesn't mean avoiding as much tax as you can today. It very much may mean that you're going to pay what you should pay this year, maybe even for the next 5 years, only then to realize a strategy that's actually going to help you out more in that sixth year. And I think it's just something we've been trained, like psychologically, like, tax refund is great. You see all those ads like spend your tax refund on a new couch or that big screen TV for the Super Bowl or whatever, the the car deals pop up, right? They know that there's extra cash coming, and they're just trying to get it, in their pocket. But I think it's one of those things where a tax refund is really just a return of dollars you didn't have to pay. And, that's not a bad thing, I guess, but it's also not a great thing. And don't try to maximize your refund today, because there's usually going to be some consequence down the road. I see this a lot with the business owners. I see this a lot with people who get sucked up in the, real estate is tax-free, conundrum and all the tax advantages of that. But I always like to frame it with my clients, like taxes are purely a consequence of decisions that we're making. It's not necessarily good or bad, but focus on the decisions you want to make first and paying taxes around that versus vice versa.
Yeah. Don't do something purely for tax reasons if it's not within your own desires.
Yeah. Don't become a landlord just to save money on taxes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And two, on that, like, you're still spending money a lot of times to save on taxes. And that's where it's the first thing I tell almost all my business owner clients, like, look, I understand deductions. I understand how they work, but you're spending $70 to save 30, and that's not really like the point, especially if you're not saving well, right?
Yeah. Definitely. And I would say, like, this is a good plug for working with an accountant or a financial planner. I know we don't do that often, but like having someone who you can proactively connect with throughout the year is super helpful. I have an accountant. Could I do my own tax return? Probably. Do I want to? No. And they're going to bring new ideas to my attention. That's going to be helpful. I mean, I'll give the example. I ran into someone the other day that they had such large deductions because of business type things going on that they could actually recognize more income and pay nothing in taxes. So there were years where they were paying nothing in taxes and could have been recognizing income that's going to get recognized at some point, probably in the future. So there were missed opportunities there. And that's a good example of they were avoiding tax, which is great, but they almost avoided it too much, which I know sounds weird, but when you're not fully utilizing, and that's rare, it doesn't always happen, but that's just one example, sort of an extreme point.
Right. Well, I think there's other things too, and this is kind of now going down the rabbit hole, but it's, the way some of the ACA credits work, like you have to have some income, because if you have no income, like you're disqualified. But if you have too much income, then you're disqualified too. So there's a lot of ranges in those tax codes. And that's where I think that's why tax is such a pain point for a lot of people. It is kind of like 3-dimensional chess, where just because you're seeing one move one way doesn't mean you fully understand the impact of another area of the tax code and how that's impacting you. And that can be equally or possibly more problematic than the problem you were trying to avoid in the first place.
And it's a pain. I feel your pain. I have people ask all the time, like, why is it this way? And it's like, well, some lobbyist, some law, something happened. I wish it were simpler.
And it's not easy to make that big of a change, right? No. I mean, it could be, but a lot of people are going to be upset, and people don't like change. So
exactly.
All right. So
what's the last one?
Else? All right. The last one I have is just consistent saving. I think this one just ties in to the emergency fund and a lot of the things that we're talking about. Like if you're planning and being proactive and you know what direction you're trying to go in, it's pretty easy to figure out what you need to, or maybe a better way to frame that is what you want to save for certain things, whether that's retirement or having some taxable brokerage account for the thing you want to do 10 or 15 years from now, but you're not yet retired. I think it's just, it's really nice once you get into that autopilot mode. And I think that's where, once you have that emergency fund and you're not worried about, a few $1,000s or losing your job completely destroying you on day one, and you have some time to react, it's a lot easier to just go about and enjoy the things that you want to do and just not worry about it. I mean, I'll speak from personal experience. Like when I'm sure you had the same thing, when you started the business and there's like no income coming in. You kind of had to micromanage your money a lot more and think about every little decision you're making. And now that the mortgage is on auto pay and the utilities are on auto pay and all these things are just on auto pay, like I just don't have to worry about it. And I think there's like, that's where financial freedom happens, where you don't really have to think about it. Like, you should still pay attention to it, but you don't have to think about it and muscle your way through every week, month. And I think that's just more of a thing too, with so many people living paycheck to paycheck, more due to lifestyle than like their actual necessary living expenses, if we want to put it that way. I think just having consistent saving is going to help a lot. What would you say to that?
I really liked your framing of not having to micromanage a lot of these different things. And I think that's what consistent saving does after you check the boxes on everything. And I would also throw out that it doesn't have to start large. I think a lot of us forget that we can start with $5, $8, like whatever it is, get in the habit. I think the habit of it is what's really important, because it's hard. Like if you don't do something consistently, it's like anything in life, right? If you don't write consistently, if you don't exercise, if you don't eat well, like if you don't get into the routine of it, it's really hard. But no one starts out being able to bench like 400 pounds, right?
I don't think many people are benching 400 pounds.
Well, even 200 or 100, like whatever it is, right? Like you got to start somewhere, right? And I think that's what's important to keep in mind about the consistent piece of that, is starting somewhere and then adjusting it along the way.
100%. All right. Any closing thoughts?
I would just say we have some fun episodes coming up next. So we did green light today. Next one up is yellow light. So these are going to be maybe a little spicier, like
gray area.
Gray area. It depends. And then the red light, I'm really excited for, because these are ones that are like, nope, that's garbage. You should not be doing that. And yet people are doing that. So stay tuned.
All right. Sounds good. I'm excited for those two, and we'll catch you all next time.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Me and Money podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show. Have a question you'd like to suggest for a future episode? Drop Matt or Elliott a question at their email, or use the linked form in the show notes. Like what you heard? It would be a tremendous help to us in our mission of having real conversations about personal finance by leaving us a review on your favorite podcast app. A few words can go a long way in connecting those looking for content like ours on their app of choice. You can also support the show by liking, sharing, and subscribing. Thanks again for listening, and be on the lookout for future episodes soon.
The Me and Money podcast is hosted and produced by Harmony Outsourcing Services LLC. Matt Fizell is an investment advisor representative of Harmony Wealth LLC. Elliott Appel is an investment advisor representative of Kindness Financial Planning LLC. However, the views and opinions expressed by Matt and Elliott in this podcast are not intended as individualized investment advice on behalf of Harmony or Kindness, or as tax, accounting, or legal advice. Although we gather information from sources that we deem to be reliable, we cannot guarantee the accuracy, timeliness, or completeness of any information prepared by any unaffiliated third party. When specific investments or types of investments are mentioned, such mention is not intended to be a recommendation or endorsement to buy or sell the specific investment. Harmony is a registered investment advisor authorized to do business in the states of Wisconsin and Texas and other jurisdictions where exempted. Kindness is a registered investment advisor authorized to do business in Wisconsin and Washington and in other jurisdictions where exempted. Registration as a registered investment advisor does not imply a certain level of skill or training. This website contains links to the Harmony and Kindness websites that provide general information about the advisory services offered by Harmony and Kindness. These links are provided as a convenience only. Harmony and Kindness can only provide individualized services after you sign an agreement and receive required disclosures. Users of this website may, but are not required to, engage the services of Harmony or Kindness for advisory services. Please remember that all investments involve varying degrees of risk, and the future performance of any specific investment or investment strategy is not guaranteed to be profitable or equal to any historical performances. As a final note, we'd encourage you to reach out to your financial professionals before implementing any of the strategies or concepts discussed in this podcast. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.